Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Norb.
And I'm Mike.
And we are the Watchmen.
The men who watch.
Because if it's on a screen, we're talking about it and sharing our thoughts about it with you guys.
So today's show, we are going to talk about the top 3 shows you have to watch.
Yeah, so before we get into it, I just want to thank you guys for those of you who are watching on YouTube and for those of you who are listening on our podcast. Keep watching, subscribe, and we love the fact that you are listening or watching us do our thing right now. So please continue to do so. We truly appreciate it.
We really do.
Mike,
thank you.
Yeah. So Mike, why don't you get started?
Okay. So we talked about this before. This is not like a top 3 or anything. This is just 3 different shows we're watching. And you're probably going to laugh at me, but the laugh comes with a follow-up question. But my 3 shows, I'm going to say it right now, they're all science fiction and they're all Star Trek.
Okay.
And
that's fine.
And what's funny about this is I was doing a lot of thinking, and you know, Norb, you and I, our friendship came out of our love for science fiction, and you know, we can quote Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, till the cows come home. Mm-hmm. And yet, I feel like when it comes to Star Trek on television, I have left you in the dust on shows that you just aren't interested. Yeah, I mean, ever since Star Trek The Next Generation, I know you didn't even care that much about that show. I know you saw the movies, but I mean, there's been so many Star Trek shows, and I've seen a good bit of them. And again, we love Battlestar Galactica, the TV series, but I'm going to just ask you straight up, why no love for Star Trek on television?
Well, I wouldn't say there wasn't any love for it. When Next Generation came out, I didn't watch it religiously. I would occasionally check it out, and some episodes grabbed me, but I certainly wasn't, plopping myself in front of the television on a regular basis to not miss an episode. I guess for whatever reason, it just never really connected in that way where I.
Well, how would you feel like how would you feel if I said I occasionally check out Breaking Bad?
That would be tough to occasionally check it out because there's such a flow to the story. So, and I don't know if Star Trek's the same way. I think, Star Trek's, even the old Star Treks were made in a way where you could jump from one show to the next, and it wasn't like you missed the one in between and now you're lost. I've always felt like it's just a new story. They're into a new world. And I think Next Generation, to a certain degree, was like that. But
well, that sounds like a comment from someone that hasn't watched a lot of Star Trek shows, because okay. All the ones today are just like all the other episodic TV. They follow very, very long story arcs.
But I guess I'm talking about Next Generation. Was that one where you had to follow one to the next, and if you didn't, you'd kind of lose your place in the flow? I didn't think it was like that, though.
Yeah, I think you're right. Next Generation
that's
was
the only show I'm talking
last.
about.
That was the last one to have probably more just single shows that weren't tied so much together. Right. But after that, it all changed.
Yeah, and that's all I'm talking about, because I never watched any other ones. I never watched any other Star Trek shows that were on TV, Deep Space Nine and Enterprise. I never got into those.
But my point is, after that, there's been about 5 more Star Trek series on television, and you have not even given it a shot.
No, I couldn't even name. I'd name the 2 I know, Enterprise and Deep Space Nine. I don't think I know. Voyager? Wasn't that another one?
Yeah, so again, why?
Okay, so I named 3. Why?
That's my question, why?
No, it's probably because Next Generation didn't yank me in. I'm laughing because it reminds me of one of our own roommates. When we talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, he had a code name for a nickname for Star Trek The Next Generation, which makes no sense to you guys, but it's funny to me.
You have to know the 80s.
But I don't know. I guess because in that show I didn't get as pulled in, so because I didn't religiously watch that one, I then felt more of a drop off when the next one came out afterwards. So if I'd been really into the Next Generation, I probably would have leapfrogged into the next show. But because I didn't get into that one, it just didn't really pull me in for the remaining series. You know what I mean? So I can't say there was I never made a decision. I'm not watching any Star Trek shows. It just didn't happen for whatever reason. So
but they're not even on your list. They're not even on your list. I mean, you talk about your list. I know you said Americans is on your list, but they're not even on your list. I mean, why?
No.
I'm trying to get to the heart of why you have zero interest in Star Trek now. I'm just trying to just dive deep.
I think
Find
part
out
of it is
why.
I think part of it is because I know that these shows are there's so many episodes that to tackle going into it would be a huge investment. You know, kind of like when you had to talk me into getting to Game of Thrones, which I'm glad I did because I knew that was going to be a huge investment of commitment to get into that. But I guess I also think there's so many shows out there that would I want to jump into. Well, I guess I'm thinking I know there's older ones from like the 90s and something in between, but then they got the new ones now with Picard, which I'd probably be more inclined to watch that now because it's new and just kind of came out, as opposed to going back to like 90s stuff and watching that, since I feel like that ship has sailed and I missed that boat and it's too far gone now for me to jump back into those boats. But I would check out like the new one because it's new and the episodes are shorter, the seasons are shorter. I could probably watch that and not feel like, man, I gotta watch like 5 years of these, and that's back when they had like 20 episodes a season and all that stuff. So that would probably be my, one way I'd get back into it. Like I said, I never made a proclamation that I will never watch another Star Trek show ever again. I'm done. That's it. It was never a conscious decision. It just sort of.
Well, I know you never made a
way.
proclamation. It's just the fact that you have zero interest. So I'm just trying to find out why. Just diving deep into the heart of your brain. Just to know what is it that made you fall along the wayside and just never get back on the horse.
Even when the movies came out, there was that part where it was like the crossover between the old Star Trek and the new Star Trek, and the new Star Trek movies started coming out. And I watched most of those, I think. But we've had this discussion before where when it came to the Next Generation, I was never as invested. I was definitely more into the Kirk and Spock days of Star Trek. And when it came to Data and Picard, while those shows were probably better written and better produced in terms of quality, I didn't have as much of a emotional connection to those characters. And so I didn't get as pulled in to the new, characters because all the other ones were kind of gone. And so when the new ones after that came out, they were even more farther removed because these are guys I had no connection. There was like the big-eared Ferengi guys, I think is what they're called, right? So, but I had so I had no real connection that drew me into those characters. So without that, the only thing I had that was in common was the name Star Trek. But there was no Kirk, there was no Spock, there was nothing that's like, I feel the draw to view with those characters again. It's like I have to start over with whole new people I don't know anything about. And I guess because of that, and again, that disconnect that started to happen with Next Generation, it just slowly sort of phased off. So,
in Norb's famous words, and because of that, I'm out.
I haven't used that a lot, but I think I'm going to start using that more often. Yeah, I was out after that, but again, never made a conscious decision. It just slowly became less interesting to me.
Well,
and I'm sure I had other stuff in my life going on that I just.
You of all people know though that every show is going to have new characters. Whatever show you watch. You have to know, okay, season 1 is going to be a little bit more work because I don't know these characters. I have to get to know them. So any Star Trek series is going to start out like that. And what you're kind of saying is, well, I didn't want to get into new characters. If it's not Kirk and Spock, I'm out. Because I know Kirk and Spock. They're my old friends. But I don't know any of these new people. They're not my friends. And what I would say is, well, you have to make them your friends. The only way to make them your friends is you have to start watching season 1.
Well, it's true. And I guess, but you have to decide, do I want to be friends with them? And you only have so much time in the day to go and decide, I think I'll go hang out with these friends this time. And there was a stage where I was not watching a lot of TV, and really only reason I'm able to watch more TV now is because of current situations, being that we're at home a lot. There was just also a point where I just wasn't watching a lot of new episodic TV series. And so when I did, it was usually a very small handful of things that just sort of perked my attention. But I have like a show on my list here, which I will talk about, that loving a first show and then spin-offs that don't necessarily connect. And so you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to my list on here.
Well, speaking of that, I should probably get into the heart of it.
But
I think that the moral of this story, though, is that Norb just doesn't want to make friends with any new Star Trek people. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
Hey, that's okay. I said I was going to go check. I would be curious to check out the new Picard one, which he is sort of like an old friend from that crossover period. But I'm sure there would be new faces I'd have to get to know, which is okay with me.
Yep.
So
All
I'm
right.
not completely
Fair
closed off. I just got to be selective with my time and the friends I want decide to
Fair
hang
enough.
out with. Can't be friends
And
with
again,
everybody.
We all make decisions on what we want to watch, and there's not enough time to watch everything. And I just was curious why my Star Trek friend that you were has kind of I blazed the trail on my own for many years.
I'm sorry you had to go on your own on this, and I can't be there on this.
Just
Star
can't
Trek
talk
journey.
about it with you. Usually we can talk about stuff, but again, can't talk about it. So to talk about my first pick, it's a show that I am halfway through season 2 on, which is Star Trek Discovery, which is available on CBS All Access. Also, it's available on Blu-ray. And I started watching this show on Blu-ray because I didn't have a membership to CBS All Access, so I just waited for the Blu-ray release. And I like physical media, so I could be patient. I didn't have to watch it day one. Star Trek Discovery is the 7th series set in the Star Trek universe. It was originally set roughly a decade before Star Trek, the original series. The show stars Sonequa Martin Green as Michael Burnham. It also stars Doug Jones, Anthony Rapp, and Mary Wiseman. The show takes place primarily aboard the starship USS Discovery before jumping from the 23rd century to the 32nd century. Season 1 also had Captain Lorca, which was played by Jason Isaacs, and I know you know Jason Isaacs is. He's been a bad guy in a few movies like The Patriot. He was in Harry Potter as Lucius Malfoy, Malfoy's father. So Jason Isaacs is definitely a good bad guy. Although he's not necessarily the bad guy in Star Trek. There are many sides of him in the show, and I'm gonna try to keep this pretty spoiler free just because it's out there now, and I think you should watch it. The visual effects in Star Trek Discovery are first class. Nowadays, for a science fiction show, visual effects aren't a problem or anything that could pull the show down. I mean, nowadays you can do visual
all
effects.
the effects are good
it's
these
all
days.
so good. Now it just comes down to story and characters. One kind of little fun fact I found is this is the first Star Trek series that Paramount had nothing to do with. Paramount actually was involved forever with all the movies and The Next Generation and all the other shows. So again, the show is great. I'm really enjoying it. Very, very creative thinking from the writers. And again, season 1, I'll say this about any show. Season 1, you have to work a little harder at it because you don't know the characters and you have to get to know them. And the tricky part about shows starting up is not only are you getting to know the characters in the show, the actors are getting to know the characters, and the writers are getting to know the characters, and the producers are getting to know the characters. And they're all trying to find a synergy as they go through that first season to figure everything out. And so usually it's season 2 where things start to really get even better. And that's the case here. I really find that to be the case with many shows. The last thing I'll say about Star Trek Discovery is an interesting discovery I made watching it is as I was getting to know the characters, there's a character on the show named Saru, and he's an alien who's part of the main crew of the Starship Enterprise. And I remember right away I liked him. There was just he was a nice guy character. He had his demons like anyone, but I remember I thought I like this guy. And I looked him up and I thought, of course I like him. He's played by Doug Jones. Doug Jones is Guillermo del Toro's guy who has played all the creatures and monsters in many of his movies. And I realized right away, if there's a guy who can play a creature with makeup and a mask, it's Doug Jones. You know what I'm talking about, Norb?
Who's Doug Jones?
Doug Jones, he was Abe Sapien in the Hellboy movies. He was the creature in The Shape of Water.
Oh, okay.
He was in, do you remember Pan's Labyrinth? He was the creepy creature.
Yeah.
He's Doug Jones is the guy who will wear heavy costumes.
Okay, gotcha.
And he has this amazing ability to survive in these costumes all day on a set. When, you know how it is, there's moments when you're shooting that they got to fix problems and the guy in the costume can't get out of the costume. He's got to sit there and just wait. And I listened to an article by Doug talking about all these methods he uses to kind of help himself survive inside the prison of a costume that he's in during these long days on set. But the interesting discovery I also made with the show is going back to the movie Hellboy, which is a movie I like very much. Doug Jones played Abe Sapien in Hellboy, but he was voiced by David Hyde Pierce, who was Niles from the show Frasier, if you remember that. And Niles had a very distinct English accent, so it made the Abe Sapien character very, very kind of, elegant in his voice. And I really like that. So when they came out with Hellboy, the Golden Army, they allowed Doug Jones to be the voice of Abe. And I didn't know at that time Doug Jones like I do now. And I remember when I watched Hellboy 2, I was disappointed and bummed that David Hyde Pierce did not return as a comforting voice I was used to. And in a small part, it made me not like Hellboy 2 as much. But what was really interesting is that after spending so much time with Doug Jones and his voice in Star Trek Discovery, I actually watched Hellboy 2 with my son. And of course, now Abe has a voice I'm very familiar with. And I liked it better, and it didn't bother me anymore. So it was a revelation, a discovery, you might add, that reminded me that sometimes your impression of a film can change over time for other circumstances that you may not know are coming.
So you liked it better because you had some familiar friends in there now. Whereas the first time you didn't have the familiar friends, so you didn't like it as much.
Absolutely.
Isn't that interesting?
And the point is I did watch it to get to know these friends. So there you go. That's my my thought on Star Trek Discovery, first of 3 of shows I think you should take a look at.
All right. Well, so going to my list, it is not a Star Trek show, as you could, no big surprise there. These are actually, you have seen some of the shows I'm going to talk about, but Black Mirror on Netflix. This is a show that I remember some friends had told me about. And, I was kind of skeptical about starting new shows at the time, but I looked at it, and what's great about this show is that it's described as a contemporary British reworking of The Twilight Zone, with stories that tap into the collective unease about our modern world and the technologies that surround us. So what got me into it and why it's an easy to get into show is that they're mostly shorter stories. So it's a multi-season episodic television program, but each show is its own short program. Some of them are actually as long as a movie, like almost 90 minutes, so they could actually be considered its own feature-length episode. But most of the shows are around 45 minutes, maybe an hour. So you don't have to invest a ton of time. You can watch one and get your fix, and then go back later and get another one, because each one stands alone. But what I love about this movie is, there's the occasional recognizable star in it, but really what the star of the show is the writing and the conceptualization of the premise. And that is, every one of these shows takes place in the not too distant future, really immediate future, where it's just a little bit ahead of where we are now. So people aren't in weird flying cars or doing anything bizarre like that. They pretty much look the same, but the technology is just a little bit ahead of where we are. And it poses questions like, if you can implant a chip in your child that can protect her from seeing anything bad or hearing anything bad and let you know where he or she is at any given time, that would make you happy as a parent. But is that, in the big picture, what's the long-term side effects of something like that? Or what would happen if you could record your memories and you could go back and watch it, and even watch it with somebody else, or have somebody else watch your memories at like a DVR, because I think we've all imagined how cool that would be if you could look back and remember a certain moment and relive it. But at the same time, if you could actually access those things, would that be a good, or would it really be a bad thing? So it poses a lot of cool questions like that. Is the world a better place because of technology? And where could it go if this technology actually becomes as good as we could, potentially imagine it to become? So some of them are a little bit dark. It's definitely a show that some kids can watch, but there's often some episodes which are totally fine for kids, for certain age kids. Some shows I won't let my kids watch because they're just way too much mature, either violence or adult behavior, if you know what I'm talking about, that sort of thing. So my kids have actually watched a lot of these episodes. I've watched them with it, and they really enjoyed this show too. So Definitely a must-watch if you're looking for something you can jump right in, not feel that overwhelming commitment to having to go, oh man, I gotta watch 4 seasons. You can just watch 1 or 2, handpick the ones you like, and it's totally good. So Mike, I know you've seen these too. So one of my favorite series on Netflix.
You know what's funny about that is I would say it is a must watch, but it's a must preview before you decide which ones you want to watch with your kids, because these are definitely TVMA shows.
Yeah.
You got me into Black Mirror, and it's great. I have not seen them all. I've seen quite a few, and there was one that the best one I think is the Star Trek parody that they do.
Funny how Star Trek finds its way back into the conversation. There it is.
There's one to watch.
Star Trek.
I'd pick that one first if I was trying to get someone to give it a shot. I'd say watch that one first because it was so clever, so brilliant, so creatively interested in the thought about what it means to have a world of virtual reality that you go escape in, and possibly what do these virtual reality characters, do they think and act and do things when you're not there? So it was great. The hilarious thing about Black Mirror is my example of the definition of what a season means has definitely changed over the years, because season 3 of Black Mirror, I believe, has like 3 shows.
Yeah. I don't even think you could call it a season. It's just the year.
But they call it a
shows.
season.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, you look at it and it's not overwhelming because there's only a handful of them on there. So it's easy to watch. But yeah, it's short stuff. Perfect for our short attention span world that we live in now.
Good show. There's one that talks about a dating app. It deals with what does a dating app mean, or what does it mean to try to meet someone on an online web service. And it goes to the idea of how the computer tries to match people together. And it was so clever. Clever. And that's one of my favorites.
And that's the one you can't show the kids, though.
Can't show the kids that one.
And my daughter, who's 15, Sophie, she keeps asking, why can't I watch that one? Why can't I watch that one? It's because there's just a lot of sex throughout that whole thing. And it's, some shows are going to be like that, but there are other ones which are totally fine to watch, But there's some like you definitely got to preview to make sure that it's okay for your particular kid. I have to say, the one show that when I watched it, the one I watched was the premise was I believe it was the Prime Minister of England's, the daughter of the royal family gets kidnapped. And basically to save her life, the ransom demand is that the Prime Minister has to do something disgusting on worldwide TV with a certain something. And if you don't, we're going to kill her. And to watch what unfolds in this episode of is this guy going to do it to save her life? It was like shocking the way that the episode played out. But after that, I was all in. So you have to see for yourself if you take to it. But pretty gritty. Pretty gritty.
So I was in on the Star Trek one. You were in on the shocking, disturbing one.
Yep, but I love the Star Trek one too. I was.
And I like that disturbing one too.
Star Trek fun.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yep. So what do you got? What's your number 2 on your list?
So my number 2, as I said earlier, is still in the world of Star Trek. My number 2 is Star Trek Picard on CBS All Access.
That's the newest one, right?
This is the newest one. So, being such a huge fan of Star Trek The Next Generation, when I read that they had talked Patrick Stewart into returning for a new series as his famous character, Jean-Luc Picard, I thought, well, I'm going to have to get CBS All Access for this one because I want to see this one and I don't want to have to wait a year. And season 1, I've got about 2 shows left in season 1, and I hope season 2 is better.
Oh.
That's what I'm going to say about that. Season 1 has been tough for me, and my expectations were really high. But probably the biggest struggle for me has been one, and this comes to how you remember your friend. We're talking about how you get to know your friends through these shows. Well, my friend Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek The Next Generation would talk like this, number 1. And he would say, "You're ready to take command." And he had a very
forceful, commanding voice.
Commanding voice. And he's a Shakespeare actor. And so he was the captain and he was strong and you got behind this guy.
Right.
Well, he's a lot older now, and in Star Trek Picard, he talks like this: "You're ready to take command, number one."
He's got the old tone to his voice now.
He's got that old man tone to his voice, and again, I know, Patrick, there's nothing you could do about it. I know that's just what happens.
That's sad.
I mean, you and I may be doing this show 20 years from now, and we may be talking like this. But
I know. That is
but it's
sad.
hard when I knew what he was like, and that's what I was expecting. And so it's taken some adjustment for me to accept that he's an old man now. And
Yeah.
and of course, during all the action scenes, I'm always, oh, there's the stuntman. Stuntman came in, took over. You know, he couldn't do that karate chop anymore like he used to. And so that's one thing. Otherwise, again, a season one is just, it's a harder season to get through and get into because you're still getting to know the characters. And so I'm still in. And they're doing season 2. It's been renewed, and I'm gonna just hold out hope that it will continue to get better. And that's all I have to say about that.
Stupid is a stupid does. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's my cue to go to my number 2, and that would be another Netflix original. It's not a show. It's actually a Netflix movie, but I thought it's kind of appropriate for this time now. It's the show or the movie Bird Box. Came out on Netflix a couple years ago, and it stars Sandra Bullock, and she plays a mother who's trying to protect herself and her 2 children from supernatural entities that make people who look at them go insane and commit suicide. Mike, I don't know if you've ever seen you haven't seen the show yet, have you? Okay.
I have not.
Well, I recently watched this. I'd seen it the first time around the time that it came out, and I watched it again this time with my kids because they didn't want to watch it the first time it came out because they heard it was super scary and super violent. But I kind of took a look at it again because it sort of fits where we are right now in this time in the world where everyone's kind of afraid to go outside and be around people. And in this case, this show was all about stay inside, don't go outdoors. That was kind of the warning that's always broadcast, don't go outside. And because if you looked at this thing, it would cause you to go crazy and kill yourself. So it's a pretty simple premise, and it's all about trying to survive and get to this place where there's possibly a safe way out of this nightmare. And so I decided to have my kids watch it, and they were not scared at all. I think it helps that they've kind of grown a little bit more accustomed to some more, violence and action, and they've certainly been exposed to plenty of language by this point in life. So a lot of that is things you have to deal with in this show, but it was never too scary, never too violent. There's definitely some bloody scenes, but my kids were able to handle that okay. And so it was fun to watch that with them. And, it's just it's a simple premise where you can imagine yourself. Again, it's very easy to relate to because it talks about, how do we go out and get things? We need to get supplies because we're gonna starve to death and we don't have things. So they have to figure out ways to go outside without putting themselves in jeopardy. So it's very much timely right now, being that it was 2 years ago when it came out, but applies so much in this world we're living in right now with this, aspect of fear of being outside of your house. And so if you're looking for something that kind of is a little bit of a tingler, a little bit of a, on the edge of, suspense, it's a good show to watch, especially in this time and day that we're living in right now. So there you go.
All right.
Rush out and put the Star Trek down and go watch this, Mike. Bird Box.
It's all you on that one. I know nothing about that show.
It is I think it is classified as a horror film because it definitely has scary moments in it. But it's a good character show where you meet a lot of different people. Feels kind of like what you might imagine a Walking Dead episode to feel like. You have a lot of strangers come together, thrown into this crazy situation. They have to kind of figure out how to work together to survive. But it's all in a 2-hour movie, so you do get to the end of it very quickly. So there you go. If you want to get a little bit of 2018 pandemic type scares and fun, Bird Box is one to check out.
All right. So my third show
Your third
is
Star Trek
one.
show.
is one that I'm not even going to recommend to you.
Oh.
Because I don't think anyone will ever try to watch this.
Wow.
And I'm going to try. Now, with what I was saying at the beginning of the show, I've not seen every Star Trek series. I've just seen a lot more than you. And when Star Trek Deep Space Nine came out, it came out in 93, and it was set in the 24th century when Earth is a part of the United Federation of Planets. It's based on the space station Deep Space Nine, which is located adjacent to a wormhole connecting Federation territory to the Gamma Quadrant on the far side of the Milky Way galaxy. DS9 premiered while Star Trek The Next Generation was still going on. It was an interesting time where they actually combined two Star Trek TV shows out at the same time. And I was super excited about DS9, and I started watching it. I couldn't get into it. I tried, and about halfway through season 1, the Next Generation was where I spent my time, and Deep Space Nine, I just couldn't. I wasn't into the captain. He was a Benjamin Sisko's, played by Avery Brooks. He was just a little quirky, odd, not like Captain Picard at all. And so I gave up. Well, that show went on for 7 seasons. 7 seasons. And what amazes me about talking about what a season meant back in the 90s, a season meant 24 episodes a year. So Star Trek's Deep Space Nine has 176 episodes.
Wow. That's what I'm talking about. That's a lot of shows to watch.
Now, just for comparison, Game of Thrones had 8 seasons, and it was 73 shows. About 66% less than Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And, what does that say about television today? I mean, did they just get cheap?
Maybe they just got tired of, this is too much work. Let's just, let's do what you always told me Nabisco does. They, instead of trying to charge more for their stuff, they just put less crackers in the box, right? Isn't that what you told me?
Yeah.
So they're just putting less shows in the season. That's one way to save money. But
what that accounts to for me is respect for the shows of that time. Not just the shows of that time, but science fiction TV shows in the 90s. Yes, they had some computer graphics, but they still had to build a lot of sets. Took a lot of work by a lot of people, a lot of cost. So, nothing but respect for Deep Space Nine and its 7-season run. But the fact that it ran for 7 seasons made me think, during this time where a lot of us are at home more than normal, I thought, this would be the time for me to give this a shot. And I always liked Worf from Star Trek The Next Generation, and they brought Worf back to Deep Space Nine, and he was with the show for 4 seasons. Fortunately, I had given up halfway through season 1, which was long before Worf showed up. So, it has been a personal goal of mine to get through Star Trek Deep Space Nine because it is clearly beloved by many, many people out there. Even my brother-in-law, who watched it back in the day, told me, he said it gets better. And historically, Deep Space Nine has a place in history. It was really one of the first television shows to start doing more episodic type story arcs where they would span a story across 5 shows. And apparently at that time, there was a lot of battling behind the scenes going on with the writers and the producers about that very thing. The producers just wanted the typical Star Trek, just like you talked about, the one show that you could watch whenever, not tied to anything else. But with Deep Space Nine, they wanted to get into more deep storytelling. And so they started doing 5-parters, 6-parters, and of course I had given up with it before they got into that. Well, I can happily say that I got through season 1 again, and it was hard, but I'm into season 2 now, and it's starting to get better, and I'm starting to get into it, and I'm really excited. I feel like I got past the hard part that's always difficult with the first season. So I got a lot of shows to go, though. So it's my personal goal. The other reason I don't think anyone is going to give it a shot is because this is another thing that's difficult about 90s television and 80s television that you can watch today because it's on paid programming or various streaming services, is that it's 4:3 standard definition. And people just have a hard time with that these days. You have to turn a part of your brain off when you watch a show like this and just almost put yourself back in the 90s when you would watch the stuff on a tube TV, where resolution was not an issue. There was no high definition. And one of the things they did is they did remaster Star Trek The Next Generation to a new high-def audience. And I've listened to other talk shows talking about this remaster process because many DS9 fans wanted them to do the same thing, but it cost too much money and they didn't get the payoff. And I've heard some experts say that they truly believe the reason Star Trek The Next Generation Remastered did not pay off is because they didn't make it 16:9 widescreen. They still kept it with the square 4:3. So it's much more detailed, the resolution's better, but it's still square. And if you're gonna make stuff work like this, it's gotta work for a younger audience. And I think today's younger audiences do not accept square shows.
Well, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, you get to a point where you get spoiled by this level of quality, and to go back is hard. It's just hard to, all of a sudden you realize, this is what it looks like, and that can be said for a lot of things, especially when movies or shows today are so much higher in production value from, like you said, science fiction shows now, pretty much across the board, look spectacular. No matter what platform you're watching it, whether it's a Netflix original or something else, they just all look good. But back in the 90s, special effects, they had to work really hard to get those things to look as good as they did back then, but they're clearly not as good as what the level they are now. And so it's having to undo all that sort of stuff we've become so accustomed to, including getting used to this box format instead of the widescreen that everything is on now. So yeah, that is one of the hard parts about going back to it. But that show Friends, I don't believe that's 16:9, is it? And they're still making tons of people are still loving watching that show, no matter what format it's in.
I think Friends may have flipped over to 16:9 halfway through its run, I think.
Okay.
But I'm not a big Friends watcher, so I can't say that for sure.
Anyway, I know that has a major life in syndication and streaming, after the fact. But anyway, but that is tough. That is
So Star Trek Deep Space Nine is the third show that I am watching, but I'm not going to say anything like you should really give us a shot, because to be honest, I don't think anyone will. But that's okay. It's my personal project and my personal goal, and I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for anyone else. So I'm totally okay with that, and I'm not going to ever, Norb, try to talk you into watching the show. You can count on it.
Well, good, because I think you'd be wasting your breath.
I know that.
Too. It's funny though, looking back, I still got to do my number one, but you started off the show talking about sci-fi and why am I not watching more Star Trek, series where I have not given them a shot. But 2 out of the 3 shows you talked about, one, you were disappointed in Picard season 1, and then you even talked about how you gave up on Deep Space Nine yourself and are forcing yourself as a commitment to just see it through for the other one. So it's not like you came through going, you're missing out on these great shows that you've chose to pass on or have just simply not gone on to, because they haven't exactly been home runs off the bat for you either. So
Norb, I know you too well. I was prepared for you to say that. I knew it was coming. So my response is, I left Star Trek Enterprise out of this entire discussion, which is a great show. So I'm going to tell you, you should check out Star Trek Enterprise. It's really good. And you know what you're going to do is you're going to go, okay, yeah.
Well, I have heard you tell me about Enterprise. I know you've told me about Enterprise. I guess the thing is, with all the Star Treks out there are certain ones that I would see first. I'm curious about Picard. Enterprise you've spoken about in the past and say it's a good show. Isn't that the one it's one of those on-demand shows, like CBS All Access or something? Isn't that what
they all are.
Yeah,
they all
okay.
are.
But I don't have CBS All Access. I didn't get it, so I don't have it like I can just hop to it. I'd have to consciously go, I'm going to pay for CBS All Access, and then I can watch this. There's nothing on CBS All Access that I am watching, so I'm not motivated to get the channel. But
I can clearly say Star Trek The Next Generation, I've watched it all and it is terrific. I've seen all of Star Trek Enterprise. I'm working through Deep Space Nine. I've watched Discovery, and I'm watching Picard. What are you watching?
Well,
Zero.
No, and that brings me to number one. What I was watching, I've actually watched this show twice through, and that is the show Breaking Bad. Now, I know this is kind of late to the party. I was late to the party the first time I watched it because the show had already been on AMC for like 3 or 4 seasons. And before I finally discovered it, it was one of those shows, it was much like everything else. And this rolls back to the whole thing you're asking, why didn't I watch things? Well, the same reason I didn't watch Game of Thrones, the same reason I didn't watch Breaking Bad. I knew these shows, and these are shows I knew people said are good and you have to watch them. And it was just, I wasn't ready to jump into committing to a series, especially on TV where I had to watch it, on a regular, like weekly basis. So it just took a long time for me to finally get around to it. But thanks to streaming. Again, you can watch Breaking Bad on Netflix. I believe all the episodes are there, 5 seasons. And for those of you who don't know what Breaking Bad is the story of Walter White, who is played by Bryan Cranston. And he's a chemistry teacher who begins making meth to make money to pay for his lung cancer treatments. And eventually becomes one of the most ruthless drug lords in New Mexico. And he has a buddy sidekick, Jesse, played by Aaron Paul, who's an awesome wild card character on this show. And what I love about this show and why I watched it twice, I couldn't believe I actually watched it a second time, it's just, it's one of those shows where it's got a mix of tension, fear, humor, but all wrapped around a normal guy thrown into these very unusual circumstances. And anytime, and that's why I like Ozark too, anytime you take that feeling of, what would I do if I was thrown into this situation? And it's very relatable that way, because it's kind of, anytime it's a everyday person thrown into bizarre circumstances and they have to figure out a way to get out of it, it's fascinating stuff. And I know you've watched this show, and it was so sad when it came to an end, because I didn't want it to end. I wanted to keep going on this ride with Walter White. And this segues to the point what we were talking about earlier, in that just because I like a show doesn't mean everything they spin off from it is going to be something I'm going to automatically jump onto. They did 2 things they spun off from the show. They did Better Call Saul, who Saul Goodman is a lawyer and the character who's a hilarious character, and they made it his own spin-off from that show. I don't remember what seasons there are. And they did a spin-off, sort of like one-off movie that takes place where Breaking Bad left off, called, is it El Camino?
Yeah, that's right.
El Camino.
That's right.
It was,
Yeah.
and I heard it was coming, and I was excited about it. I tried to watch Better Call Saul. I didn't get pulled in, so I never really got into the show. I watched El Camino, and the whole time I was watching it, all I kept thinking about was, man, I really miss Walter White. Why isn't Walter White in the show? I mean, Jesse's great as a sidekick, but sometimes the sidekick by himself just ain't enough. You need the man. You can't just have a superhero and a sidekick and then decide, let's just do a sidekick show and think that's going to hold its own. So I was a little disappointed in the follow-up. I really, and I think that's why, watching the original series again was fun to do, because Bryan Cranston is a fantastic actor, and he does such a great job personifying the evolution of this character, and it was great show.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, and so many people told me about it, and I was late to the party, but I'm telling you now, if you haven't seen it, take advantage of this time you have while you're at home and watch Breaking Bad. You won't regret it.
I think, and to your point, that both the spin-offs were both with co-stars, or secondary characters to the original Breaking Bad. Now, if they'd have done a spin-off with Walter White, I bet it would have been different.
It would have been awesome.
See, and that's just it. They I'm sure it comes down to sometimes money, probably. Bryan Cranston wanted a lot of money, and they realized they just couldn't do it at that kind of a budget level. So,
one thing I really like about his character, and this applies to anyone, you talk about Picard, you start to really connect with certain aspects of what makes that character unique. Like Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones, he had the bullwhip and fist fights, and Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon, has a little screw loose, so it makes him unpredictable. But one thing that was great about Walter White was he was just, it added why chemistry has so much practical application in the world, because you realize his knowledge of chemistry and how things work as compounds and chemicals, which he learned to make meth because he knew so much about chemistry, also got him out of a lot of situations because he knew what he could do if he just took this compound and that compound. He could use it as a quick getaway to create some kind of a weapon or something. And it made you realize, wow, I guess there's something cool about chemistry, because for a lot of people, a lot of times the kids ask, like, why do I need to learn this stuff? I'm never going to use this in real life. Well, if you get good at chemistry, you could become, good at making meth and making millions of dollars as a drug kingpin. So, there's always good in every class that you take that you think has no application in the real world. That's the lesson there for you.
All right, well, that's our top 3 shows. Time for the surprise. This is a pretty simple one. Again, always pushing my love of physical media. So here is the Star Trek Discovery Season 2 Blu-ray pack. And I just want to make note of the over 4 hours of special features, 9 featurettes, deleted scenes, 2 short treks, and 6 audio commentaries. That's one of the great things about still buying things on physical media is you get more than just the show itself. And I always like gag reels. Everyone likes bloopers. And they'll usually always put gag reels on a disc. And that in itself can just be worth the cost of admission. So
I will say something. I think that's cool. That's really great. And I'm sure, especially if you're a fan of that particular show that you get, that's one of the bonuses of buying the physical media. Here's what I think is the reality of most people and why they don't lean towards necessarily buying that, knowing that even though they add those bonuses. A lot of people, I just don't think they take the time to watch that stuff. How many of you out there watching or listening actually have sat down and listened to an entire movie with just a commentary track? I bet a very small handful of you have, and maybe it is because it was one really special film that you loved. If you have the opportunity to, I highly encourage you to do it. If you're a fan enough to want to sit through a movie where you don't hear where you don't focus on the soundtrack, but rather you hear the director talk about, now in this scene, this was great because Marlon came over here and he was telling me about how he was having a really bad day and so he had the runs and so we had to work away. If that stuff is appealing to you, this is the stuff you get that you won't get when you're streaming this stuff. But if you're the kind of person who watches a show and when you're done, seen it, done it, I'm moving on, I don't have time to watch bonus reels, gag reels, bloopers, extended behind the scenes, whatever. There's probably a good majority of people out there who don't care about that. And that's probably why that stuff doesn't really appeal to them, because I'm sure the majority of people out there don't indulge in that because they don't have time. This audience nowadays, they don't have time. That's why I really think they don't make 24 episodes or whatever a year. They don't have time to watch them all. People are too busy and their attention span is too short. They're barely able to stick with one episode and get out. Let's watch all the extra bonus material.
Yeah, dang it, Norb, you just ruined it. I was going to tell everyone to watch our commentary track of this show. When it's done.
That would be
cool. We were going to do a commentary track on this show. Comment on our comments.
That would really get the viewership if we did a commentary on our commentary. I mean, that would be like the most engaging material ever created on podcasts or YouTube. I think you're on.
Well, the one thing I'm going to say is physical media is dying, and everyone just thinks, oh yeah, I can always watch it on Netflix. But what they're going to find is that sometimes what you think you can go find is gone. And if you have the hard copy, you can always get it off your shelf years down the road where you decide you want to watch that again. I want to watch that Breaking Bad again.
But I have an answer to that, because I've had plenty of times where I go, hey, we need to watch something. Example, we'll talk about this later, but Kill Bill, Volumes 1 and 2. We just watched them last night. And you've never seen it, I've never seen it, and I don't know how I missed it. But these are awesome movies, but it wasn't available for free on Netflix, and it wasn't available for free on anything. So I was able to get it on, but I was able to get it on Hulu, which currently I think I'm on a trial basis right now. I might just pay for it because Hulu's pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff on there that I can't get for free on the other sides. So you can get it. You might have to pay something, but I might have to pay $4 for it. But again, unless it's a movie I'm going to watch like 4 or 5 times later, or want to watch the behind the scenes commentary, which maybe I do on Kill Bill. That's a freaking awesome dual set saga. Most movies I don't need to see the commentary or the gag reel of. For a lot of movies, they're just like one-offs, like Bird Box. I don't need a commentary on that show. I just want to watch the movie and I'm done. So not every movie deserves the treatment of all the special stuff. A handful do, but not every single movie. That's just my editorial on it.
You do realize there are shows out there that do not exist on physical media or streaming. So that there are things
probably,
that are hard to come
there
by.
probably are. Yes, you're probably right. And I haven't run into that case where I couldn't go and pay for it somewhere. Usually I can always find it someplace eventually, and usually I'll have to pay for it. But I haven't run to the point where it's like, I can't find Dances with Wolves anywhere. It doesn't freaking exist. I can't even pay for it. Guess I got to go to the online piracy. No, but you know, I haven't run into that problem yet. So anyway, that's my
We
take.
could go
on the
on
physical
and on
media
about this, but I think we
I'm
should
sure
just
I'm
stop.
sure we'll rear its ugly head again. But since the show's gone way longer than we expected it to, we'll wrap this up right now because I'm Norb.
And I'm Mike.
And we are the Watchmen.
The men who watch.
Before we sign off, I just want to say again, thank you for watching today or listening on podcasts. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for a future show, please mention it in the comments or send an email to us, and we'll be happy to read about it.
Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching The Watchmen.
Please click on here to watch other episodes, and be sure to hit that like button too.
And please subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll always be alerted to any future episodes.
It really helps us out, and we appreciate it.
We'll see you next time. And remember, we'll be watching.